Luffy's dream, probably one of my favorite topics to talk about in One Piece. All the themes of One Piece are embedded in there. Makes me think a lot about what my dream would be, what I want to happen if I could just dream for something that's impossible, that could only be possible if I was absolutely free, whatever that means. So just as a quick overview, we're going to work on defining it. We're going to look at what is the opposition, what is the kind of history of the dream, history of the world, and we're also going to get into themes of collectivism, liberation, promises, and then manga spoilers. In terms of the scope, we're really going to try to stick to the text-based evidence as much as possible. That doesn't mean we're not going to talk about real-world feelings and stuff, because that's kind of insane. We're going to try to connect all the evidence together as best we can to create kind of a chain so that everything kind of makes sense. But what is the dream? When we think about Luffy's dream, we think about the few people that know it, and they are all absolutely shocked by it. They're shocked in its kind of childlike nature. They're shocked in how dumb or stupid it is, probably because of how impossible it is. It's something that only a child would think. Kind of in a baffling way, somehow Goldie, Roger, and various other people have had the exact same dream, word for word as far as we know. So if we take a look at some of the stuff that I've put up here, when Luffy shares his dream, Sabo and Ace are just like, huh? I want to see what you'll be like in the future. We also have these elements of promises that we see across the series, notable because Shirahoshi is a quote-unquote ancient weapon. Luffy makes a promise to take Shirahoshi out to like a real forest one day, to basically take Shirahoshi to a new world, to feel the true sun one day. We also have that kind of prophecy that Luffy will destroy Fishman Island, which really doesn't make a lot of sense of how Luffy could destroy Fishman Island without destroying the Red Line itself. Fishman Island is underneath Marijois. At the bottom of the Red Line, there's basically a large hole right there, and that hole at the bottom of the Red Line is where Fishman Island is located. And I wanted to include Rayleigh's smile here because that is his response when he asks Luffy, do you really think you can conquer the seas? Do you think you really can conquer the Grand Line, conquer the world? And Luffy responds, he doesn't want to conquer anything, which implies that he wants everybody to be free. If he sees himself as king, that's what he wants to be, but he doesn't want to conquer anything. That means he wants everybody to be basically on the same level, right? We also get Nika, Joy Boy, Redacted, spoiler, Roger, and Luffy. That's who I think all share the exact same dream. And there's a handful of people who know it, who we haven't mentioned yet, would be Shanks and Yamato, who we will get to later. There's also some really interesting phrasing that Luffy uses when he talks about his dream. I wanna blank, and then everybody reacts and he says, that's at the end of my dream. He wants to be the pirate king not for power. He wants to be king of the pirates because that is who he thinks of as the person who is the most free. And he thinks with that freedom, king of the pirates is synonymous with finding the One Piece, right? The person who does that is king of the pirates. And with the One Piece, with that level of freedom, maybe his dream is possible. And he uses this language, and that's all at the end of my dream. So he wants to create a world where his dream happens and then it actually ends. What does that mean exactly? It's difficult to say, but it stuns people and they find it hilarious. It's something that you can't even believe somebody would say. And while some people laugh, others who have been enslaved, who have had no freedom at all, cry. It brings a tear to their eye. And just to kind of drive home this point, even Ace, when he's talking about Luffy's dream, says that's at the end of my little brother's dream. And it's always interesting which words are kind of like bolded in the chapter releases. And both times end is bolded. And so, in my opinion, like a big idea that we're leading to is this confrontation of dreams, ideologies, desires. The confrontation with Big Mom and Kaido on the rooftop of Onigashima is kind of a warm-up or foreshadowing for another similar conflict. Luffy's side against Imu's side, and then maybe possibly Luffy's side versus Blackbeard's side. It's a possibility. Some of the things that we want to note about this dream is that it is connected to a specific person at the correct time, specifically somebody that Roger is waiting for. We see this at the end of Marineford during Whitebeard's death rattle. And we also hear this from Roger himself when he talks about just being too early to the One Piece. That is one of the kind of bigger mysteries in my mind of what does it mean to be too early. In my opinion, I probably lean towards the right people weren't there yet. There was no Luffy. Poseidon was not born yet. Wano's borders weren't open. There was basically no conditions yet. But Roger did the important thing of he announced that the One Piece exists. And so while he wasn't able to use it, he was able to set in motion the conditions that were needed for somebody to join up with this future person, join up with the next Joy Boy. Roger and his crew came up to the One Piece, and there's something about it that needs to be interpreted to a degree, right? The person that finds the One Piece they might come to a different conclusion than Roger and the Roger Pirates. This is said during Sabaody. It's also written about in the logbook, and it's talked about in what is later going to be manga spoilers as well. Roger was probably hearing that voice of the past, like that voice of all things type of thing. And depending on what you hear or what you see, how you feel is going to affect how you react. Luffy has the voice of all things to a degree. It's been something that's been developing in him throughout especially the second half of the series. But Luffy also has this kind of powerful, empathy embedded into him where he, to a degree, cares about even the people that he, wants to destroy. When he's fighting Katakuri, he reflects on some of his, hockey lessons from Rayleigh, and Rayleigh's like, what are you going to do in this scenario where you have somebody that's stuff like that? And he's like, well, I would think about how they feel. There's this implication that his opposition is only his opposition because of small deviations in what their desire is. And that maybe if Luffy can understand what they want, why they are the way they are, that maybe Luffy himself will act a little bit differently. This was always one of the most fascinating parts when I was reading One Piece. I get to Sabaody, and Rayleigh says that Shanks came and paid him a visit, and his arm was gone, and his hat was gone, and he talked about Luffy with this enormous smile. Mr. Rayleigh, I was so surprised. In the East Blue, there's a kid saying the exact same thing as Captain Roger. The very same words the captain said. And just the fact that he's saying the exact same thing is very interesting because Roger's gone. Luffy and Roger never met. Luffy never heard this dream from another person, but yet he's saying the exact same thing. That means, to a degree, Roger's soul lives on, I would say, through Luffy, which adds a little bit of context to Roger and various other people being like, I'm not going to die. So there's this element that the soul in One Piece is a very real topic. Even when Vegapunk is working with Kuma and turning him into a cyborg and eventually killing him in the process, Vegapunk talks about how the soul, there's actually a weight to it. And then we actually see Brook's soul leave his body and then come back and rejoin with his skeleton. And now he's like a living thing. And so the soul is actually kind of the core of a life. So as we went over earlier, you have to be king of the pirates. You have to acquire the One Piece. The ancient weapons appear to have been left to do something. Joy Boy himself leaves the ancient weapons to be used at the right time. And this is part of the reason why Roger's too early. Now, what does it mean to use the ancient weapons? It's kind of a tough question, right? Because so far it kind of seems like the ancient weapons are possibly people to a degree. It's a little bit unknown exactly what the ancient weapons are, obviously, but the one that we for sure know exactly what it is Shirahoshi. And if we know anything about Luffy, Luffy wouldn't use somebody for his own gain. He just wouldn't do it. It would never happen. And that's drilled in during Arlong Park when he ends up deciding to destroy Arlong Park. He destroys Arlong Park because it is Nami's prison. He gets really fucking mad when Arlong is like, you can't use Nami like I can. So essentially what I hear from Luffy is, I'm not going to exploit people. I'm not going to use them for my own gain. And there's something deeply political about that in our real lives, right? How often are people trying to exploit you? The most common place is at work. But because we're told that we're all competing with each other. We're all trying to establish some type of dominance over each other. But really, if you think about it, that causes alienation, right? That leaves you alone on your island. In One Piece, all the islands are so isolated for the rest of the world. Almost nobody ever leaves. And that's part of the reason why a pirate, in particular, for somebody like Luffy, is like the embodiment of freedom. They go out and they see the world and they make connections. The only people that can really understand the world. Whatever the fuck Emu is doing in the Chamber of Flowers, they're not going anywhere. They're not doing anything. Maybe they were out in the world years ago, but today's world, Emu has basically no understanding of what the world is unless Emu has eyes everywhere somehow, which I don't think has been shown. And one of the most important themes that we see in One Piece that comes up over and over again is the kind of necessity of being fearless in the face of death. And that's because if you waver in the face of death, then you start giving into hopelessness. And that is when you can be exploited. That is when you are vulnerable. What is death anyways, right? We've kind of gotten into that a little bit already. We get Gold Roger, who's essentially reborn into Luffy, even though they didn't share a devil fruit or really anything. They share a hat. So maybe that's all you need is one strong connection to kind of have your will stay alive. We have Harley. Harley is probably the person that really drills in the idea of like, my death doesn't start when my heart stops beating. My death begins when nobody can remember me. And so that really brings to life the idea of how powerful the past is going to be. And it really adds into like the importance of the Void Century. This 100 years worth of conflict and people and history that is completely forgotten. And for the most part, besides Joy Boy, to a degree, and everything that's on the poneglyphs, those people are dead. Their voices are essentially locked into the stones. Their souls are trapped. Now, are their souls trapped at the bottom of the ocean, like Davy Jones' locker? Or are they trapped in the poneglyphs? Maybe it doesn't matter too much right now, but these are interesting questions. The Going Merry, right? The Going Merry was told that they could not sail anymore. And sailed anyways one last time against all possibilities and then died anyways and felt like their dream had been accomplished. Fisher Tiger, one of the more complex deaths, I would say, right? Because Fisher Tiger's story is that he liberated slaves in Mary Joie when it turns out he himself was a slave that escaped Mary Joie and saved others while he did that. He didn't climb up just to save slaves. And then the way he dies also, the story of that memory of him is manipulated and changed by Arlong to fit a Fisher Tiger that didn't really exist. But then at the end of the day, it is Jinbei and Shirahoshi that keeps the true memory of Fisher Tiger alive. And that's what keeps him going. Because if it was just Arlong, in my opinion, if it's a fake story, fake news, he's fucking dead, right? If that's the only thing that lives is a manufactured version, a fake, a copy, it's not the same. Even though the truth of Fisher Tiger's death is incredibly painful, it's the kind of the honesty in it is as important as anything. Yeah, in Wano, we got Odin. He dies. He's like, I don't give a shit if people talk about my stories. He's going to keep existing anyways, like kind of in the hearts of the people of Wano. And when you see Zoro in Alabasta, when he's going against Mr. One, and he has to cut steel ultimately to defeat Mr. One, he drops his swords, but he can still sense his sword even before he has any understanding of hockey. He can feel the rocks breathing, and he actually uses his understanding of kind of like hearing these souls or hearing these voices within inanimate objects to understand how to cut what he wants to cut and not cut what he doesn't want to cut. The world, the main obstacle for Luffy, right? The world, the creator, the god, the celestial dragons, Emu himself. It could be society, these kind of like cultural norms, people's perceptions of what pirates are. And then it could be like physical barriers like the Red Line and the Calm Belt, which actually create massive barriers to accomplishing this dream. A giant wall stands between your eyes and the world. You can't see the way forward right now, and regret and guilt are consuming you. So Luffy's opposition is nature itself. It's the planet. Darkness. Darkness in a literal sense, like the void, kind of maybe what emu is. And then darkness, like this darkness that gets into your heart and starts pulling on these strings of hopelessness to start casting doubt within yourself. Something that can be exploited. Again, and we can see Luffy in this moment after he loses his brother. This is like his darkest moment, and Jinbei's trying to wake him up by reminding him what he still has. It's this emphasis on why it's important for us in our world to, despite the fucked up stuff all around us, that we need to really try to maintain optimism for a better future. And in political discourse, we would call this revolutionary optimism. And it's this kind of understanding that progress is slow, we take steps back, and understanding that it isn't all just rosy tinted glasses, that we actually have to do something and make actions, and that we are, even if we don't get to see the fruits of a new future, we can be kind of like a stepping stone for somebody else accomplishing that dream one day. Maybe generations from now, maybe decades from now, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 150 years from now. But I think it's important to really kind of like believe in your dream, right? And to try to see past that darkness that's in front of you that tries to afflict your mind and afflict your hopes and dreams. Because if you start letting that darkness in, your dream turns into a nightmare. And then you end up becoming like fucking Gecko Moria. So Luffy's allies, that will eventually, it's his crew, it's all his friends that he's made along the way, and it's the hopeless. The hopeless meaning the people that are doomed, the people that have basically joined too late, or they got fucked up before. They have to put everything behind Luffy. And you see this constantly in almost every major like end of a saga. You see like Nami looking at Luffy like this when he's inside Arlong Park about before he starts destroying it. She starts feeling like, oh shit, he's in that room. Alabasta, Vivi is just hopelessly screaming for somebody to hear her voice. Skypiea, literally the Skypieans fall to their knees and pray right before Luffy rings the bell through NL's face. And Wano, they literally are sending their prayers up into the sky on lanterns. Dressrosa, everybody's cheering with the gladiator to save them from the birdcage. Fishman Island, same thing. They're praying for their hero that they just met literally hours ago. And so we start getting this understanding that the world itself is a sort of birdcage, that islands are a birdcage, that the walls in the Goa Kingdom that are put up to separate this wealth from the garbage, from the trash that they would discard and burn, they put a wall there. And that essentially makes a cage there, and then it creates another cage for the trash and the garbage between that and the mountains, the physical geography of the island itself. And then we get the birdcage motif that's very strong in Dressrosa. They literally have a birdcage. It creates in-groups and out-groups, people with power, people without power. It creates divisions. And that these cages, they're artificial. The world of One Piece, the way that the islands are, it's not natural. It is caused from rising sea levels that have changed how the world actually looks. That these islands, or maybe not even islands at all, but maybe large continents that are mostly underwater. And that they are also like illusions. These divisions that are made, they're separating humans from humans. They're not keeping out like a specific danger. They're just saying these people are less human, or we are more deserving, so let's protect ourselves. Even though it's the people in the privileged group that are kind of the source of all the misery. So how do you cope with this, right? We have a few different ways. You can become cynical, like Fujitora. Fujitora gets stroked constantly, but really, Fujitora is a deeply cynical person when we first meet him on Dressrosa, and even by the end of it. It's only when people start protecting Luffy with their bodies, when the citizens that believe in Luffy, that Luffy freed, start protecting him with their actual bodies, does Fujitora start going like, damn, this Luffy guy's, he's different. He's different. I fucked up maybe by blinding myself. I might not be able to see, but I know it's there before your eyes. He's talking about this power where he has all this rubble that he's holding over their heads with his gravitational powers. But it's kind of a parallel with darkness, right? Like, that blocks out the sun. Then that kind of alludes to Emu themselves, and it also alludes to kind of like the hopelessness, how hopelessness can kind of stab your heart with darkness and start changing you. A black sky with no escape, an endless downfall of rubble that sinks every ship fleeing to sea. Don't you see it? Even if you escape from me, your life will be in peril from the 4 emperors now that you've eliminated Joker. Your future is hell. Luffy is like, all right, I'm fine if it's hell. Like, I'm still going to do what I want to do. So you can become cynical. You could hide within. You can become Garp, where you can, despite all the fucked up darkness that you see all around you, you decide to stay within the system and you try to, change it from the inside or play like a waiting game. It's always fascinating to me how many people in One Piece are kind of just waiting around for decades for some shit to happen. And then Luffy's like, all right, I'm 17, throwing on my straw hat. A few weeks later, he's like blasted from Sabaody to Amazon Lily. And like he's just done that in like such a small amount of time. He's already halfway across the journey. And then when we come back from the time skip, it's similar, right? They just get on the boat and they just start going. They're in Dressrosa for like a few hours. So while everybody else is thinking about these intricate long games and stuff, Luffy's just like, I want to go do it now. Or you can try to play the game, right? Like Nami does in Sabaody by trying to buy Cammy back from the slave auction. We'll just buy her, right? That's how the world is. We're going to just play the game. But the game is rigged. If you play the game, if you go by the rules, you're fucking done. So I think you have to escape the game, right? And this is driven home in God Valley with Ivankov, where people are like, oh, we can just survive this game. And Ivankov's like, are you stupid? Are you an idiot? You flying from Stupid Town, bro? You got to escape this game. We have to leave. And so then we start getting this theme of maybe Luffy's dream involves actually leaving this world or creating a new world. This game is rigged. What if the One Piece is a tool to create a new world, a tool to leave this world? The biggest opposition to Luffy as like an individual is Emu, who just has, maybe every devil fruit power, maybe just like a stupidly busted hacks devil fruit, and insanely crazy hockey. Luffy's fairly far away from this right now, but we're getting there. And what Luffy needs to do to beat Emu, based off of what I've seen throughout the series, is Luffy needs to understand Emu. Let's keep it a buck here. Emu is suffering. This is not a happy person. This is not a free person. As much as they have imprisoned the world, they are also shackled or imprisoned to the Chamber of Flowers. Emu's like MAGA, basically. Like, make the world great again, guys. Come on. Like, I just need the One Piece myself. That's not how progress works. Chained by nostalgia, Emu. Break those chains and just force a new world on this motherfucker. That's how I see it. And then we got Blackbeard. Now, remember when we were talking earlier about how Luffy's dream specifically talks about that's what's going to happen at the end of his dream. But here's Blackbeard when they first meet saying, people's dreams don't ever end. Blackbeard wants to become the new Emu to a degree. It doesn't mean Blackbeard wants to do it the same way as Emu, but unlike Luffy, Blackbeard wants to conquer. And I think it's very telling that in this major panel, which comes much earlier than these panels about Luffy's dream that's mentioned by Ace at the end of Luffy's dream and by Luffy himself in chapter 1060 when he tells the crew his dream. He talks about how that's at the end of his dream. Blackbeard says, people's dreams don't ever end. He wants to keep this world going and conquer it. It is antithetical to Luffy's dream. So some of the themes that we want to talk about that are connected to Luffy's dream is this kind of collectivism, that Luffy doesn't see himself as conquering anybody, that Luffy sees they're needed for Luffy to have his dream achieved. When he goes and gets Sanji on Whole Cake Island, he tells Sanji, like, I cannot become king of the pirates without you, Sanji. It is impossible. And so Luffy is saying, I literally need other people to achieve my dream. I cannot do it alone. Which to me also shows how absolutely fucked Emu is, because Emu is incredibly alone. And everybody that Emu is even kind of connected to, Emu is trying to control them with fear and power. Luffy is tied with siblings that he's made by just promising and sharing their dream together. Luffy has fought against the greatest powers in the world, even when he knew he would be destroyed in response, when he protected or stood up for some of the most marginalized people in this massive world. He makes promises with people that he sincerely intends to fulfill. We got the crewmates, friends of the crew around the world, and just people who give him food. If somebody gives Luffy food, you are a friend. He will die for you. Everything like that. Luffy really places so much importance on other people, and I think we really see that he sees other people's lack of freedom, lack of ability to just eat as much food as they want as a problem for himself, a problem for his dream that he wants to be realized, that if he does not help these people, that he himself cannot be free. Then we got the history of this dream, because it's not Luffy's dream necessarily, it's a shared dream with many others. That is part of the reason why it is so powerful, but it's also something that they don't want to impose on others. When you impose on others, you add some cloudiness to their own understanding. Like, I think of what happened to Hody Jones. Hody Jones was infected by other people insisting to him about the shit that happened to them, happened to their family members. Because he wasn't able to go out and see the world for himself, it completely corrupted him and turned him into a monster. I mean, Hody Jones is such a tragic figure because he was trapped in a birdcage. He never actually got to see what it was like. He never had an opportunity to decide for himself. You have to go see the world at your own pace, is what Rayleigh tells Luffy. And it's only when you do that that you can come to your own decision to decide what to do with the One Piece, to decide how to realize that dream. Tama sharing her birthday food, which is like, they're eating like straight up like sewer slop soup most of the time in Wano. She had just this tiny little meal that Luffy would just think barely a meal in the first place. But it is an absolute treasure to Tama, and she gives that to Luffy, even though she herself is starving to death, facing famine conditions. I think about that with people in Gaza right now. About a quarter of Gaza is facing famine conditions. The parents are starving too. Like, it's not like they're not starving, but I'm a parent of 2 kids myself. There's no situation where I wouldn't feed my own child before myself. And that's like part of what is so powerful about love. Because when you love somebody, you it's no longer just you, it's us or them. There's a wider understanding of who we are. And when we are alienated, when we are having our hearts infected with darkness, the kind of evils of the world, the pain that waits us, that makes it more difficult to love. And it's actually Tama that extended that hand to Luffy first. She was saved by Luffy, I think, right? That's how I remember it. But I think Tama saw Ace in Luffy. Tama obviously felt so much love for Ace that when she saw Luffy, she saw that same kind of like energy and life in Luffy, that she simply just had to share her birthday food with Luffy. So when you go out and see the world, how do you understand the world, right? You have trials and tribulations. You go and you solve problems on the islands. You make friends and you help them. You fiercely face the reality. You don't worry about your own mortality. You do what you know is right in your heart, because that's what's true. And like we were just talking about with Tama, all of this ends up unlocking a clashed consciousness, right? That all these other people in this world, they are also human. They're also beings with dreams and hopes and fears, and essentially any one of them could be you. They are like connected to you even though you don't know it, because of the alienation you've faced throughout your life. And ultimately all this leads to wanting to liberate others, to liberate yourself. Because if you can liberate yourself, if you can liberate others, then you can become the most free. Because if there are others who are suffering as slaves, as people trapped in nightmares, then to a degree that can happen to you. Because again, everybody is connected. What is freedom though, right? What is freedom? We know that Luffy sees the King of the Pirates as the most free. So freedom is understanding and seeing the world and making connections across the world. Because if you have friends all over the world, if you know what the world truly is, then you can see past the illusions. You can see past that darkness that infects people. Can you truly be free without understanding the chains that that bound you or bind you. It's easy to understand that you're not free if you're a slave, but if you're relatively a regular kid, it's a little bit harder to understand what the chains are. Some of the chains that bind you could be like your mortal body that you bleed. Some of the chains that bind you could be your island where you're born. And then some of the chains that bind you could be your own desires, right? That if you let darkness into your heart and then your dream or desire turns into a nightmare, but you don't know it, that's a bit of a trap. And that's something that I kind of suspect is what happened to Emu. Like when I think of Emu and I think of Luffy and Nika, I think of Emu as somebody that might have like been a good person at one point, ate a Zoan devil fruit and lost control, and that will took them over. What does that look like exactly in certain cases? A little bit difficult to know. We know what it looks like on its most extreme sense in Impel Down, but how much is the will of Nika, for example, affecting Luffy in his Gear 5 form? It's a big question mark. If the world during the Void Century was a world that also had suffering and exploitation in it, which I think it would, because if it didn't, then this dream had probably already been realized, which it clearly hasn't. So if it has exploitation and stuff in there, what if somebody desired for the ability to exact revenge on the oppressors, to turn them into demons, the demons that this person sees them as, or the person that desires this? Because devil fruits are born from desires. And so if somebody desired something like that, it could very easily create something like a human fruit model devil or something, you know? And then you got a big problem. You got a big problem because something like that could have a very powerful will, and I could see that taking over. And then who even is Emu is a question. If there's somebody who was taken over, then they are definitely a prisoner or a slave to this desire that was born from pain during the Void Century. So some of the forms that come up about freedom. There's 3 that I see. There's probably more. Revolution, embodied by Monkey D. Dragon. Justice, embodied by Monkey D. Garp, or maybe Kobe. Garp could have been a true embodiment of justice, but he's too old. His heart is too fucking fucked up from all the darkness over the decades, seeing all this fucked up shit. He had to watch his son, and he just sat there and let him die. That's how fucking chained Garp is by whatever darkness happened to him. So the other part about justice too is what we will have to reconcile with one day in One Piece is, what does justice look like for the people that cause all this suffering? What does it look like for the celestial dragons that materially benefited from this world, from this system that they didn't necessarily create, but they've been hand in hand with? What is justice for Emu? What happens to the slave masters? What do you do with them? Does hurting them back mean you're free? I don't think so, right? That's soothing your own pain. But if you're truly looking for this like dream where there's eventually a world where peace is true and dreams are actually possible, I don't know. I don't feel like revenge really fits in that world. I'm very curious if Oda implements what kind of justice Oda like implements into Luffy's dream. I personally have a tough time like trying to guess what that would look like, because the people in our real world that cause that same degree of suffering, it's hard for me not to just hate them. I'm not Luffy as much as I love him. Peace and dreams. Dreams are constant throughout the series. And then we got Luffy saying, I'm not going to conquer anything. The one who is the most free is the Pirate King. We get Sabo saying, I'm most afraid of being swallowed up by this nation. You can rephrase that by this world, by this darkness, and turning into somebody I hate. So he's leaving. He's trying to escape the game. And in Big Mom's flashback, as just a little tiny child, she starts talking about wanting a land of peace and dreams. And this ends up getting manipulated by the suffering that she had, by the lies that were put into her head as a little kid, that peace and dreams is actually where other people have to be the same as her, be the same as Big Mom, be a part of all her family. And it's all really about her power and stuff. But if Big Mom's dream wasn't corrupted, I think it would look a lot more like what Luffy's dream ends up being. So a dream is something that you have to fearlessly desire, like the deepest part of your heart. It's something that is practically impossible right? Something that you'd have to risk your life to achieve, and you probably wouldn't, but somebody else would carry on that dream. The world of One Piece is, whether you believe nihilism is a real thing or not, it perpetuates this idea of there being no meaning, right? You just kind of like are born on your island and you die on your island, and anything outside of that is not possible. And you can succumb to cynicism very easily from that, or you can create your own meaning. This is like where Luffy and them come in. They create their own meaning in this absence of an inherent meaning, and they pursue that meaning to give their own life value, to give themselves a reason to live. And that becomes a very powerful thing. I mean, what is more powerful? Creating meaning yourself from deep within your heart, or being told that there's this inherent meaning that everybody has to abide by? That doesn't really sound like freedom to me. And one of the things that Luffy does is he goes around these items and he makes dreams come true. He destroys Nami's prison to live how Bellemere hoped she could live one day. After Nami asked for this to happen, asked to be free. I can't wait to be free, Bellemere. When Vivi's screaming to have her voice heard to stop the fighting, Luffy's the one that hears her voice and makes it stop happening. Ends Crocodile and makes it rain for the first time. Fulfilling a promise for the Shandians and saving the Skypians from God. Well, both of them from God. Like, they both are like literally on panel praying, hoping, especially when the Shandians are feeling the same way when they realize Luffy is connected to Mont Blanc Noland. They're like, fulfill this promise for us. And then he makes it happen. And on a reread of Enies Lobby in Water 7, at the end of the fight with Rob Lucci, Luffy's fucking toast. He's literally up against the wall. He can't go gear whatever anymore. He looks like he's done, and then they even insert like a little flashback of Rob Lucci where he's just like this unstoppable force, and everybody starts screaming at Luffy like, we want to sail away with you, we have Robin, come on, do it. And like, he makes it happen. And is this Luffy, or is this the kind of Nika fruit that's inside him that hasn't been fully revealed yet? What about when he returns the shadows to those trapped on Thriller Bark? Everybody is just like cheering him on, praying that he makes it happen, to the point where they're literally standing outside when the sun's about to come up because they believe in him so much that they're like, I'll just fucking turn into dust, or I'm getting my shadow back. It's one or the other. I'm going to stay here screaming for him. Because of Luffy, Whitebeard ends up dying for his family. One of the few dreams that, come true that's like very explicit. He wants a family, and there's a lot of deep moments of love and family leading right up to Whitebeard's death that are only really possible because Luffy was there. Jimbei and Fishman Island dreams that Luffy will become a hero to Fishman Island, and then at the end of the arc, they're passing out the hero hats, which are just like copies of Luffy's straw hat for other people to wear their hero hats and kind of like carry on this kind of will and dream of Luffy and everybody before him. Everybody praying and cheering on Luffy to crush Doflamingo to free them from the cage. Again, Wano literally sends their prayers up into the sky on lanterns. And Bonnie searches as soon as she's free, actually comes across him pretty fucking early but doesn't know it on Sabaody, and then explicitly meets him at her most hopeless point. Okay, we're getting towards the end, guys. Luffy's dream, one of the most important parts is that it's going to fulfill a promise, and we see promises throughout this story of One Piece. The first one, obviously, is that once Luffy is even greater than Shanks, he will return the straw hat back to Shanks. And will he actually return it to Shanks or return it to some type of original owner or something, or original place? We'll find out. But Luffy also makes promises with Shirahoshi, as well as all the straw hats making that same promise. We get promises about not dying, implying that the soul of a person is much more important, much greater than the limitations of the mortal body. The soul is like your spirit. It's who you are in your core. It's how you inspire others. Oh yeah, the promise on the poneglyph in Fishman Island that Joy Boy is actually apologizing to Fishman Island and Poseidon from during the Void Century for not fulfilling a promise. Obviously implying that Luffy will be the person that fulfills that promise eventually. Luffy obviously promises Tama that all of Wano will be able to eat their fill, which is something that ends up happening. Odin promises Wano that opening the borders will bring a new dawn, that the borders have to be open so that a specific person can change the world. Spoilers! They will meet again. The ultimate promise that I can think of that is embedded into Luffy's dream. Some interesting moments that I was thinking about here when I was collecting some moments for this. Sabo realizing that Ace was not just some pirate that was executed by the world government, a tragedy in itself, but that Ace was actually his brother who he chose and loved. And it connects with this void century, this past that this long forgotten history that everybody has forgotten, that has the possibility of connecting so many people through this kind of like shared history, this shared suffering. And it kind of implies that once people remember the past and they confront the past together and overcome it, that the people, the world, or the world itself will meet again. And obviously the most important part of any of this is the Harley, which is the text, and then the mural itself. Both of them begin with a desire of Nika to exist, to fulfill a dream of freedom. It's the slaves that pray for a sun god, and it is Nika that emerges from that desire. Nika shows up for people when they're at their most hopeless. In the first world, the world ends when it is enshrouded in darkness from the serpent soaked in blood. We're going to take a look here in a second. So if the world is enshrouded, that means it's completely covered, that it's like encased in like a shell of sorts, right? Second world prospers from the energy from the first world. People travel and war spreads, and the sea god eventually rages after the sun is killed, and then it ends and it says they won't meet again. Third world. In the third world, they say they will meet again. So when we take a look at the Harley, we see what we were talking about. The earth god raged, and with its serpent of hellfire, shrouded the world in death and darkness. So where are those people now, right? Where are the people of the first world? Are their souls trapped? What I think most when I think of darkness is the bottom of the sea, right? It's only Fishman Island where the sun can reach the bottom of the sea, but everywhere else, not so much. Now, we see in the first world that they're harnessing, they touch the forbidden sun, and down here in the mural itself, you see them pulling the sun out and using it as a sort of energy. And after that happens, when the world is enshrouded, that energy that was floating out in the world, if it makes it to the second world, that amount of energy all around, something that Vegapunk makes very clear, existed during the Void Century. That level of technology is going to supercharge weapons and tools, navigation, changing people's genetic code and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be totally out of control, and war is just going to spread like crazy. And obviously, I think the second world is mainly referring to Joy Boy's system, right? The Half Moon Dream, those are the Moon Dream. People who joined up with the sun ended up dying, and then the world ended as a result. When that new world came about, right, we got man became God, creates this new world, and this is the world that we're talking about right now. The promised day is coming. We got the god of laughter, mostly Nika, Luffy, gonna end the world. And if you've seen my video that Luffy's gonna end the world, he's gonna destroy the world. It's kind of a callback to what's gonna happen to Fishman Island, to that promise. It's a callback to what happens in Arlong Park when Luffy destroys Arlong Park. If another world is enshrouded in darkness, it's blocked off, maybe he has to destroy this world to get there so that they will surely meet and have a new morning. And finally, this gets us to Roxy Xebec, somebody who I think did share the same dream as Luffy, who turns out to not be a monster, an evil pirate, that he turns out he's kind of the best, kind of fucking awesome. Oh, I left these up here again. Oops. I didn't want any text right there. I actually just wanted this slide. So when Rox shares his dream, Loki hears the dream and cries, which just reminds me of Yamato and everybody that's heard Luffy's dream to a degree, right? Loki is somebody that's suffered immensely because of how they understand their past, how they understand their suffering. But the fact that Loki is a child and responds to this dream this way is that Rox's dream touches this kind of like childhood desire that only a child could have, right? When we see Loki in the current story, when we first meet him especially, he's wearing a straw hat that's just dark. Like, it literally looks exactly like Luffy's straw hat. What is Luffy's dream? We've already gone over quite a few of these, so we're going to move on to this part where we talk about the dream that created the Harley, that created the mural. They're children's drawings from the ancient past carved into fossilized tree bark. It's a cultural relic due to its historical value. It existed from the period of the Void Century. I gotta say, says Frankie, for a drawing from Elbath, they don't all look like giants to me. That's right, in the history we're familiar with, there were sometimes wars between the races, but never cultural exchange. Maybe that means this was nothing more than a child's dream. So even in this world that they came from, the world was still completely just all relatively small islands that develop their own unique culture that causes unnecessary friction with other races. Maybe that simply means this was nothing more than a child's dream. And then we see the mural. What a fucking crazy dream, by the way. So I think things start calling into question is, I've pretty much always thought this was Blackbeard, right? After kind of defeating Emu. But as things have developed in the manga, it makes me wonder if these are monsters that Emu created through other important people we know in the world, right? That has kind of a scary implication. Maybe this is Emu, maybe this is Blackbeard. This could be Blackbeard turned into a demon form, right? And then this would be just regular ass Emu. Another part of They Meet Again that I wanted to include too, Robin and Saul eventually meeting again. I mean, surviving in the One Piece world is a feat, especially doing anything that you set out to do, some part of your dream. It's powerful shit. We have notes about how Joy Boy saved the ancient weapons for the future to be used to create this new world. So what is Luffy's dream? Anybody got a new guess? I'll start out with mine. I think Luffy's dream is to take a bite out of the sun itself. To the way that we see it right now, right? Luffy is out to create a new world where he'll be free. The rest of the world, specifically Emu, what we can talk about, wants the One Piece as well. Emu wants it for the power to finally claim the world completely. Even just that small, imperfect piece of sun, the mother flame. I'll say it's imperfect because it wasn't able to turn on Emmet. Vegapunk goes through extensive reasoning of explaining that the mother flame is not that perfect, unlimited power source that was everywhere during the Void Century. It's basically a cheap imitation. Emu wants the real ass deal. One of the ways that Luffy defeats people is not necessarily by beating their ass, but taking what they want and taking that out of the equation. So what Emu wants is the true or forbidden sun. We'll just call it the Forbidden Sun in this example. Emu wants the Forbidden Sun to be able to cleanse the world, which would be the desire of that out-of-control awakened Zoan fruit. If Luffy eats the sun, the game's over. The win condition for Emu is gone. So that's kind of where I'm getting. He's got to destroy the red line, which would lower the water level around the world, because that red line is essentially displacing the water, right? So the water will lower. All the islands will be connected together as if it were the original, couple of continents or one massive continent, a one piece. And then what was enshrouded in there is the Forbidden Sun that the slaves had to mine and extract. It is what man exploited the lowest class of people for. They exploited them for that power. And suffering that exploitation, the slaves prayed to be saved by a sun god. But what about Luffy is really a sun god besides just the idea of freedom? Well, maybe he's actually able to eat the sun or make the sun part of him. And then maybe once the sun and Luffy are together, or the sun and Nika are together, that creates the true sun. Right? That creates this new dawn that would, number one, be an end for Luffy's dream. It would have Nika and the sun finally meet, and it would create a new world where there wasn't power dynamic where some people able to fight for this unlimited power source, that it will just now be available to everybody. So that's just me off the rip, live theory. I'm not a theory crafter, but in terms of my literature analysis that we just did, that is where I'm headed. That's how I feel. I kind of want to do a voice of all things stream that's similar-ish to this and stuff. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I want everything to be structured, but I've been very fascinated with the voice of all things lately, especially looking into things like the Void Century and all this type of like larger mysteries. Thank you so much for being here. Bye bye.